Hello, Princeton Community Works. I'm assuming if you are watching this video, then what has happened is I, Jess Pettit, have been called in for jury duty. And I just want to point out that I like doing jury duty. I believe in the civic responsibility of it. The process has not really been updated since the 1700s. That gives me hope. And that's the theme for today. So if you're watching this, just know that I am sequestered in a courthouse without my cell phone, and I'm not allowed an iPad or a book. I can only bring a bottle of water. But I will be doing my civic duty, which is more important than pretty much anything we can possibly be doing right now. But you are here to learn. And so what I'm going to do during this hour we do have together is I want to be able to show you what I believe is the biggest reasons that diversity initiatives inside of our organizations are failing. We are challenging ourselves to have conversations that matter because we say we want to make better connections, but we really kind of don't. So I've been doing this work for about 20 years, and diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, justice, we tend to add letters, change the words around, etc., instead of doing something different. And instead of the something different being additive, what I'm going to suggest is that the doing something different can actually be you taking responsibility, me taking responsibility for when we are choosing to not use the skills that we already have. Now, let me just ask a question. If you, that's not a ghost, that is a deaf-blind dog who is mad that I'm doing a recording. That's Leo. If you have ever had a challenging conversation, I just want you to kind of sit with yourself. If you know you have had a hard conversation, right? Everybody has had a hard conversation. Here's the bonus though. Have you had a hard conversation that went AWOL? Like while you're in the middle of the conversation, something happened, it went someplace, you didn't really know where it was going to end up, but you hung in there. And you hung in there because the conversation mattered. You were making a better connection with this human being. The situation was some kind of pressure or something that you were feeling, and you needed to hang in there because you cared. You have the skills. I have the skills to have incredibly challenging conversations. I just choose not to use them sometimes. Now, I wrote Good Enough Now, and on page 192, if you want to snarf at it, I have a flow chart. And this flow chart is the idea of when you can start paying attention to how you want to have a better conversation or a better connection so that you can pay attention to when you kind of take the exit ramp. When do you opt out of using the skills that you normally could use? You're just choosing not to. So generally speaking, in the chat, I would upload the handout right now. It is a PDF and hopefully will accompany this video. But what I'm going to do for the recording is I'm going to share my screen off and on so you can see the flow chart. So this is the Better Connections flow chart generally. And if you're taking notes, better connections, intentional conversations, listening to others as if they're wise, spoiler alert, that's where we lose most of us. Then forming the message and being clear about the intended meaning of the message, those kind of get smushed together. Then we're going to talk about claiming or reclaiming responsibility for the impact of the message. And then we're going to wrap it up. By wrapping it up, we're going to do making meaning of the conversation and an impact on connection. So let me start first with better connection and intentional conversation, the first two stops. So what I ask you to do is I'm going to ask you to practice these, ideally with someone that you're never going to see again, like an Uber driver or a barista at an airport or something, because you really, 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 really are going to be kind of bad at this. You can see Leo in the corner. He cannot hear you or he cannot see you, but he's cute. Anyway, when you have a conversation that matters and you have the hope of creating a better connection with that person, then it's kind of like when you go camping and you want to leave the campsite nicer than it was when you arrived. Sure, maybe that wasn't your trash, but you can still leave it nicer than you arrived. When we are trying to make better connections with other human beings, what gives me hope is that sometimes we engage with people not to win or not to be right or not to make them wrong or to make them lose, but we engage out of genuine curiosity or generosity. We share vulnerably in our authentic selves. What I want you to do is to practice noticing, when do you want to make better connections and when do you don't? Now, honestly, some of you are already like, hard pass. I got stuff to do. I don't have time for this. Okay, but notice that and be responsible for that. So if you're going to practice this flow chart, ideally with someone that you're not going to see again, because what's going to happen is some of you are going to practice with your coworkers, and some of you think you can't practice with someone who wasn't at this particular session or watching this recording or listening to me speak. And I disagree, because if you're practicing with someone that you're already friends with, chances are they're going to tell you you're doing a great job, even if you're not really doing a great job, because they want to hear that they are doing a great job instead of being held accountable for not doing a great job. So practice with someone you're not going to see again. So what I want you to do is, step one is to decide, in this interaction, I want to make a better connection. So let's use a barista as an example. So you're going to decide while you're waiting in line to place your order, you're going to decide that you want to have a better connection with the barista before you end up leaving, or maybe before you get the coffee in your hand. It's not about winning or losing. It's about making a human connection with that person, because that is how we share hope with one another. So let's say that we have done that. We have decided we're going to do this. We don't hand them a copy of this handout. We don't explain the flow chart. We're doing our own work and noticing, when do we kind of want to take the off ramp and get out of having a better connection conversation, and when is it easier? When are we staying in? So let's say that you have decided we're going to make a better connection. The next step is that you need to decide when you get to stop. It's kind of like a personal training session. I don't know if any of you have personal trainers, but if you have a personal trainer, for me, it is always very helpful to know when the appointment is over, so that when Zach tells me to give him 10 more, if I slow those 10 down, I might not even get to 10 before the appointment is over. And sorry, Zach, appointment's over. I get to go. So the intentional conversation is really the structure. What are you limiting yourself to in this? So if you're doing it with the barista, maybe it's when you get your beverage in your hand. If it's a phone call, maybe it's a certain number of minutes. If it's an email, maybe it's a certain paragraphs. If it's a text message, maybe it's a bubble. Whatever. You're going to decide that the goal of this interaction is a better connection, and you're going to have the intentional conversation with yourself to know when you get to stop. What are the limits? What's the structure? How are you having this better connection? Okay, step one, step two. Step three, and this is where I said I'm gonna lose most of you, is that I want you to listen to them as if they are wise. Now, again, some of you are like, have you met Todd? He's not wise. No, hard pass. Well, maybe you don't start practicing this with Todd because you have a story about Todd that this is not possible. But you're responsible for the story about Todd, and you are choosing not to communicate with him. It's really hard to communicate with. You're responsible for your choices around communicating with him. You're responsible for the story you've written and how that impacts your connection with Todd. So maybe you're not ready for that yet. Personally, if I think about somebody I would like to have a really good conversation with, if I came up with someone like Dick Cheney, likely on a list where I am not allowed to be alone with Dick Cheney. That is highly probable. So if I wanted to practice this with someone that's unlikely to happen, that's a way of getting out of practicing. So what I'm going to ask you to do again is, you're going to practice this with someone you're likely to not see again. So they're not going to have to hold you accountable. They're not your best friends. So they're probably not going to lie to you. And you're not entitled a partner. You're not entitled feedback for like this stranger to be like, you made it to step 3. I felt like you listened to me as if I was wise. That's not an entitlement here. You are tracking your own engagement of when you choose to use your own skills and when you choose to opt out. So number 3 is, you're going to listen to them as if they're wise. So I'm a flaming extrovert. And so how I listen often is kind of like dolphin sonar. So I like send things out into the universe and see what comes back. And then I might adjust how I'm going to say whatever it is that I want to say based on the judgments and assumptions I've made about the information that I have received back. Now, we often opt out of this because we engage as if we already know everything, or we're talking at someone instead of with someone. So we don't necessarily adjust how we're presenting the information that we're trying to say based on where they are at. So back to the barista. Are they in a good mood? Are they in a bad mood? Is there a particular order that you should be placing your order in that makes it easier for them to put it into the cash register? Are they funny? Are they not funny? Is there something you need to do to change how you're going to engage with them? That's really what you're listening for. And technically speaking, they know more about how they are doing than you do. But this is where judgments and assumptions come in. So a lot of diversity trainers will tell you never, ever, 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 ever make judgments and assumptions. And I think that's a good practice. I think we make judgments and assumptions to feel safe and to feel prepared. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But it doesn't mean that the judgments and assumptions we make that make us feel safe and prepared are accurate. So we can make judgments and assumptions. I just suggest to kind of print that story out, even if it's about Todd, with extra wide margins and triple space, and then seek information that would make our story more accurate. But by listening to others as if they're wise, we're doing the edits, but we're also taking responsibility for the judgments and assumptions we're making about our observations when we are listening to them in the first place. Again, this is where most people are like, hard pass, I'm out of here. But notice that there are other scenarios where you're totally fine listening. And then there's other scenarios you haven't even gotten that far. You just cross the sidewalk, or you don't even engage with that person generally at all. But can we take responsibility for the conversations that matter, so that when we are making better connections, we know that we're conscious of making better connections instead of unconsciously making lukewarm connections. To have a conversation that matters means that you're paying attention to when you have truly opted into this process, and to pay attention to when it gets hard or when you decide to opt out. What are the patterns there? Is it around conflict? Is it around a particular identity or political belief or religious belief? Is it a particular topic that makes you like, whoop, steer clear of it? That's what you're responsible for. So let's pretend you're in line at the baristas at the cafe. You have figured out that you're how to place your order, in what way. You've written a story about the barista and what they want to hear from you. May or may not be right. You've decided you're going to try and make a connection with this person when you are placing your order, and you are kind of on the clock practicing until the beverage is in your hand. So that's your end date, because your goal, working back up, your goal is to make a better connection, right? Again, the theme is hope. So if you've decided to make a better connection, your deadline is when the beverage is in your hand, and you have observed and listened as if that person knows something about themselves. Now you are ready. Notice you haven't actually spoken really yet. You haven't engaged in a connection or a conversation that matters yet. Because next, what you have to do is what I refer to as the Swiss roll. Now, the Swiss roll usually catches people. So what I'm going to ask you to do is think about Little Debbie Swiss rolls. Now, some of you are going to have to Google this, and that's fine. And those of you that remember will know that this is kind of an obesity starter kit reference. So a Little Debbie Swiss roll is some kind of cake-like substance smushed down, smeared with some kind of expired caulking, rolled up together and dipped into definitely not chocolate, which is why you're supposed to eat them frozen. The reason why I want to invoke the Swiss roll is that you don't separate the caulking from the fake cake, right? They're smushed together on purpose, and you don't really need to separate the two of them. So I want you to think about forming a message, and then your intended meaning of that message separately, but without separating the two. What are you trying to say, and how are you going to say it? Are there any edits that you need to make based on your observations of listening to the other person as if they are wise? Are there any observations or guesses that you need to make based on the time frame that you have given yourself for the bubbles or length of an email? The goal, again, is to make a better connection. So I want you to think about what you are trying to say and why and how you are trying to say that, so that you can form your own Swiss roll and know what your meaning is. Now, here's the test. If I haven't gotten rid of you by listening to people as if they're wise, this is hard. This is real hard. And why I say that is that I want you to be crystal clear on how you are going to form your message and be crystal clear on the intended meaning of the message you just clearly formed until you feel 100% responsible for it. Now, some of you are like, 100%? That's not how it works. I'm in marriage therapy and we are 50% responsible. Well, spoiler alert, that's how marriage therapists have job security. I'm not a marriage therapist. I'm a ceramics major who is self-employed. No one saw that coming. I'm going to ask you to form a message and be clear on the intention of that message until you feel 100% responsible for whatever it is that happens. Now, let me digress for just a little bit because you don't necessarily know when you have not been 100% responsible, but that's just because you're not paying attention. When you have not felt 100% responsible for something, usually two things happen, one or the other. The first one is you sound like a turkey. Have somebody ever said anything to you and you're going, that little turkey noise? You are backing up, you are getting defensive, largely because you do not know what you meant, but it wasn't that. Whatever they just accused you of what you saying means, that is not what you meant. You don't know what you meant, but it wasn't that. So that's where the turkey defensiveness comes in. A great example of this, I love my uncle. My favorite thing that happened during COVID is that my uncle and I started talking every week. So my uncle just turned 72, I believe. He is a great guy. He's a retired naval officer, et cetera, and he loves to country dance. Not line dancing, but the swivelly kind. Loves it. He's a great dancer. I don't know how to dance. They have barbecue. I have watched. Anyway, so my uncle goes every weekend, and a young guy, young buck, as he calls him, young buck started coming. And my uncle usually leaves around 9:30, and the younger crew, he calls it the witching hour. They start arriving kind of 10 o'clock or so. So he usually leaves before that. Well, a guy started showing up around 9 o'clock. He's super nice, really polite, treated people really well, and was a very good dancer. So as my uncle was dancing, he would kind of tell people that there's a really good chance this guy's going to show up, and he's a really good dancer. He's really, really polite. So you can dance with him, and you should do that. And he's a player. Well, after saying this for a couple of weeks, the young guy eventually came up to my uncle and said, "Excuse me, I'm sorry to bother you, but are you telling people I'm a whore?" And my uncle is like, "Whoa, whoa, 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 turkey, 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 turkey. Oh, he's super defensive because he has absolutely no idea where this is coming from. Now, spoiler alert, most of you probably saw this coming, but the use of the word player has evidently evolved since my uncle was in high school, because evidently the word used to mean someone who wasn't committed to someone and dated, like played the field kind of thing. And so what he was intending to say was that this young buck would dance with a number of people without any expectations and doesn't have like a primary dance partner. That's what he was trying to say. That's not anymore. So even though my uncle absolutely did not mean playa as we would do it now, which would be a really disparaging thing to say to someone, and is exactly opposite of what my uncle's feelings are about the young buck, he got defensive because he just didn't know. He didn't know what he meant, but he didn't know that certainly wasn't that, right? So maybe that's part of the source of the turkey. Some of you are completers, and just so you know, my uncle and the young buck have really never talked again, and the young buck stopped coming as early. And that's just kind of how it is. My uncle's a Scorpio, so that's pretty much as much confrontation as they're going to get. So if you're not 100% responsible, even if you're well-intentioned and mean it as a compliment, there is a possibility that you don't even know what you are taking responsibility for. But that is only for you to determine and for you to know the difference. So can you be 100% responsible for what you're trying to say and how you're trying to say and exactly the way in which you're going to say the thing you're trying to say? Now, if it's not a defensive turkey, it's the court reporter. Now, the court reporter is you have a printout of the entire conversation. Their lines stay exactly the same, but yours change because you get better and better and better at your rebuttals. For me, this usually shows up between the first and the second conditioning cycle. And the best example I can think of is in 8th grade when Brian Baxter broke up with me. I'll pause so that you can gasp at the horror of his decisions. Now, the reason why this has made such a monumental impression on me is that I was totally embarrassed and completely humiliated by him breaking up with me in front of all of the science class. I know. Can you believe it? But the truth is that I didn't know we were dating. This has moved along in all of my relationships. I have pretty significant commitment issues. So my humiliation and embarrassment was that I was completely taken off guard. So then I didn't know how to respond. Well, now I'm a professional speaker and a professional comedian. So trust me, before I get to the second conditioning cycle, I have eviscerated 8th grade Brian. Now, I also did see him at our reunion and we are fine. So don't dox him online. But when I'm talking about 100% responsibility, it's not that either. It's not, you don't need a court report of the conversation to revisit it later because you're 100% responsible. You know exactly what you're going to say, how you are going to say it, what you are going to say, when, all of those things. And even if it doesn't land correctly, you're conscious of how you decided to say whatever you decided to say because you're 100% responsible for it. Now, let's pretend that you get there. You're 100% responsible and you click enter. You pick up the phone, you engage with the barista, whatever it is that you do. No matter what it is that happens, you can claim, or sometimes it's a repeat, so it's reclaim responsibility for whatever the impact is of the message that you have crafted in a way without being super defensive. Now, as a comedian, jokes are a really great way of doing this, and partially around the reclaiming is that there are things that I think are hysterical. And after a while, I have to really be responsible that they don't play well in an audience. I can still think they're funny, but I am responsible over and over and over and over again if it doesn't land well. That impact is my responsibility. If we could just take responsibility for our impact, intended or unintentional, I wouldn't have a job. But sir, you're not going to do this 100% of the time. But I can at least raise the bar and ask you to. At least be conscious of when you are choosing not to be 100% responsible, because that'll differentiate when you have decided to be 100% responsible for whatever it is you're Swiss rolling up. Because you have decided what and when and how based on the observations and judgments and assumptions you've made when you listen to them in the first place, because you've created that structure with the goal of making a better connection. That's the goal, right? So I'm going to share the spreadsheet again, or the flow chart again, just as a reminder. If your goal is to make a better connection, and you know when you get to stop doing that, and you listen to people as if they're wise, you Swiss roll together by forming a message that you're 100% clear of your intended meaning of that message, then regardless of what happens, you can claim or reclaim responsibility for the impact of that message without being defensive, without being a jerk. That alone gives me hope. Now that you've done that, now we can kind of wrap. And we can make meaning from the conversation and actually determine through more judgments and assumptions what the impact on this connection was. Now, if you're practicing with the barista, remember, it's the conversation with the barista until you get the cup of coffee in your hand. It's how you're going to place your order or say hello or do whatever you're going to do that you've edited based on what you've observed. You feel 100% responsible for how you're going to do it. You're going to release the Kraken. And then whatever it is that happens, you can be responsible for. Then you get to make more judgments and assumptions about how did that go? Did you make a better connection? Did you make the person smile or laugh? Do you think they feel better? You might not be right, but making judgments and assumptions are making you feel safe and prepared, and you can at least slow the process down enough that you can begin to kind of ask about the engagement and think about whether or not you're responsible for something that is a better connection because this engagement mattered or not. Sometimes when I go to a cash register, the person in front of me might be a complete jerk. So when I get to the cash register, one of the things that I say is, you are technically engaging with a customer. Why don't you take a beat, breathe, see how you're doing, and then we can commence, right? It gives them a moment to like be a human being again. I don't know what's going on in the rest of their lives. And then when they're like, no, 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 it's fine. Or they're like, wow, thank you. Okay, what can I get you? Now I can actually like say the order in the order that I think I'm supposed to do. Doesn't mean I'm right, because the goal was to make a better connection, not just to win by getting the right coffee beverage. I remember when I live in a very small rural town, and I remember when things started slowly opening back up after COVID, I was so excited because Wendy's opened. This is not an advertisement for a Wendy's, but I was real excited. And it was the first kind of restaurant in my town that opened up. And I was so excited to eat something that I hadn't made. So excited to talk to a person that I hadn't married. I pulled through the drive-through and I get to the little squawky box, right? And I'm chitter chattering away and I'm talking about how excited I am to be out of the house, and I'm going to eat a hamburger and a Frosty and some French fries. I'm going to dip my French fries in the Frosty. And the thing I'm most excited about is a burger made the way that I like the best, that I didn't have to make. So I ask for no lettuce, no onions, extra pickles, extra pickles, because I love me some pickles. I've missed pickles. And then there was a supply issue, so there wasn't a lot of pickles, and Costco ran out of pickles for a while. I'm very excited about pickles. I stop. I've placed my order. I'm very excited. The squawky box says, would you like pickles? Yes, I'm a professional speaker. I just gave you a TED talk for free on how much I love pickles. Why are you asking me if I want pickles? And it's because I hadn't really listened to them. Now, some of you are like, how do you listen to a squawky box? I don't know, the order before me, or ask a question first to kind of assess how they're doing, or make some judgments and assumptions on based on how they welcomed me on the squawky box, maybe. I haven't done that. I was just so self-centered and excited to talk to another human being and eat something that I hadn't cooked that I missed the mark. So when the squawky box asked me if I wanted pickles, I was mad. Because yes, I want like extra pickles. That's what I said. And I felt that I wasn't being heard and I wasn't being listened to, when in reality, I was not hearing and I was not listening. When we start talking about taking responsibility, that's what I mean by paying attention to how we are showing up in these conversations. We can talk about hope and put it in an Instagram meme, but for hope to really matter, we have to do something that gives other people hope. And sometimes by giving other people hope, that instills hope in us, but it allows other people to feel seen and heard. And in turn, we will feel seen and heard. And ultimately, that's a conversation that matters because it's rooted in those better connections. You all do community work. You know that you couldn't do half, if any, of your work without the connections you have with resources and people and social power, etc., within your community, because you know those connections matter. And those connections to you also matter. A lot of times when I work with organizations and they talk about people that are causing problems or initiatives that are failing, it's all external. And I'm inviting you to flip that around and figure out how you are contributing to the problem. You can control yourself a little bit, not 100% of the time, but certainly some of the time. Instead of waiting on Todd to get better, what if you're somebody's Todd? So if we can start taking responsibility for who and how we are in the world, I believe we can actually start doing something that will instill hope in other people, increase and reconnect and strengthen, if not even increase the number of people that we are connected to in our community so that we can do better work. That is the how hope is instilled in me. And hopefully that's how it works for you. Now, if you have the flow chart, usually people are like, all right, Jess, but I want an example of this. And people start thinking about examples with really heavy social topics. I'm not saying this flow chart is the solution to racism or ageism or sexism or homophobia or transphobia or ableism or any of the systems of oppression that are happening on our daily lives. But what the system can do is help you notice, when are you bouncing? When do you have the skills and you lean into them? And when do you lean away from the skills that you already have? So I am going to give you an example, and it's not a big example, but it is effective in understanding how the process can work. And if you can pay attention to how you are showing up and who you are when you are showing up, then you can make more conscious decisions about the better connection goal you have and allow for this conversation to actually matter. Now, if you were to ask my partner or my dogs or even my shrink, they probably wouldn't say that I am a communications expert. I do not have long track records without having a communication that went awry. No, but I do have a very long period of time where I have paid attention to how I show up, where I get uncomfortable, where I'm comfortable, where I'm nervous or anxious, and where I feel way more confident than I probably should. And that's my responsibility, to know who and how I am. I'm not here to judge anybody for how you got to be the way you are. You're the best tool you got going. For me personally, that's pretty sad news. But I have survived the life that I have survived, and it has produced this. And it's not anybody else's responsibility to be responsible for this. It's my responsibility to be responsible for this. And we do that by slowing down, breaking things down step by step, and beginning to pay attention to what actually comes up for us. So if I may, an example I would like to share involves flamingos. Now, some of you are already going to be distracted by what is up with flamingos, and I have a thing for flamingos. That's just true. If you're interested in the handout or staying in touch, you can even go to flamingo.day. That's a website, flamingo.day. It's a fancy link tree with access to this handout and how to stay in touch with me or whatever. Happy to do that. I should also mention that you may have some questions. And if you have questions, you can easily send me a text message anytime, not just during this conference. But send me a text message anytime you want to when you have a question. My job is to be thought-provoking. And that doesn't mean thought-provoking within this structure of a time. If you think about it when you're making dinner next week, drop me a text. The texting number is 202-670-4262. 202-670-4262. Text message me any question you want. I'm happy to help. Because again, I'm here to have conversations that matter, make better connections, because I need hope too. And by being able to work with people who are doing work or asking really hard questions or thinking and reflecting on really hard situations, that gives me hope. And then I can practice this flow chart with you. Are we going to have a better connection at the end of this? We might not agree with each other. We might not change each other's minds, but we can have a conversation that matters. I don't know anything else that leads to more hope building than that. Now, I mentioned flamingos. I have a thing for flamingos. So I tell this story as an example of kind of working through the flow chart. So I recommend, like, open it up, pull it out, print it out, whatever. And as I go through this story, I want you to notice where I am at each step. Spoiler alert, they go in order. So because I have a thing for flamingos, the thing you need to know is that my friend Sylvie, who lives in Tampa, so she cheats, but we send each other pictures of flamingos whenever we see them. Now, usually for me, it's like somebody's socks or like a sparkly thing dangling from somebody's purse. She lives in Tampa, so sometimes they're real flamingos or the big one in the airport. I don't know if you've ever seen that one. Anyway, so we just exchange gifts, pictures, emojis, whatever of flamingos all the time. I don't have a lot of friends. It's a low bar. Anyway, so one day I get a gif of flamingos hatching, and I've seen it before. I love it. It's one of my favorites. And I'm running through O'Hare. So I fat thumb copy it, paste it over to Sylvie, send it off because I have to do everything immediately because I'm a triple Virgo, but I have a therapist. Anyway, I get a text back from Sylvia that says, I think you have the wrong number. Now, again, I'm running through O'Hare, and my first thought is, who the hell is Sylvia? Well, then it dawns on me, it's my phone, so I'm probably supposed to know who Sylvia is, Jess. And I picked Sylvia instead of Sylvie without noticing, right? So then a whole nother wave of emotion comes because thank goodness it was just a gif of flamingos hatching. All right, wrong number. Well, who's Sylvia? So I start thinking, and I realize this, spoiler alert, is the emotional roller coaster of the story. My aunt Sylvia, who I totally didn't realize was still in my phone, she died in a house fire over a decade ago. It must be her number, which has obviously just been recycled and somebody else has that number. And then it hit me. This wave of joy and hope and kindness and love. I love my Aunt Sylvia so much, and I hadn't even realized how long it had been since I have thought about Sylvia. Oh, I loved her so much. She's totally responsible for how all this turned out. That's probably a big burden, but still, it's true. So anyway, so I'm so happy, and I decide I want to make a better connection with the person that has my aunt's recycled phone number. So I'm going to employ the flow chart. I decide I want to do this. How do I want to do this? I could call them because obviously I have their phone number, but I'm not a monster. So I'm going to text back. Now, my intentional conversation structure, because I need to know when to not do this. Number one, I am not entitled to any kind of response. I'm going to limit myself to one bubble. Here's a little side PSA. Some of y'all texting wrong. And what I mean is that you're texting in like a Word document first, and then you cut and paste that whole thing into a bubble. I cannot react to all those different ideas. I need one idea per bubble, please. Thank you, and you're welcome. An extra side note, have you all been getting these audio text messages where someone talks to their phone or they text by talking? We are so close to voicemail and actually making phone calls again. I can't wait. I digress. Focus. I want to make a better connection with the person that has my aunt's recycled phone number. I have decided that the most humane thing to do would be texting, and I'm going to limit myself to one texting bubble. And inside the one texting bubble, I'm shooting for like a sentence, maybe two sentences, right? Maybe. So I then have to listen to them as if they are wise. Now, some of you are like, why are you listening to a text message? It was not an audio text, but it's all about judgments and assumptions, right? So I look at their text. It is not all caps. There is not a skull and crossbones emoji. There is appropriate grammar. Therefore, this person cannot wait to hear from me. Now, as ridiculous as that sounds, some of our judgments and assumptions are that ridiculous because we want that to be the answer. That is our responsibility to check our judgments and assumptions. But in this case, I decide because the person didn't do a skull and crossbones, it's not all caps, and it has punctuation, they cannot wait to hear from me. That is how ludicrous judgments and assumptions are, but it is also how you write a story based on almost no information. We do this constantly. So I have now listened to their text message, metaphorically, of course, and decided I'm going to do this. So now I have to form my message. So I open up the little texting bubble. I write something about my aunt dying 10 years ago. You have a recycled number. Well, that seems like, I don't know that I need to say you got a dead lady's phone number. So I delete that. I'm forming the message and I figure out a way to say, like, thank you for reminding me of the person who used to have this number. I'm so filled with joy. I just wanted to say thank you. and like 12 flamingo emojis. I decided that might be too much, so I deleted 2 of them. So 10 flamingo emojis. I look at it. I have written the text message. Am I clear on my intended message? I don't want to make them feel bad that they have my dead aunt's cell phone number. I maybe a little bit know that they may not be wanting to talk to me. I am not entitled to a response. But when I write the sentence, I decide 10 flamingos might, okay, I delete 6 more. So now we have 4, that's math, 4 more flamingos. That will do 3 flamingos. Okay. My intended message and what I have written have been Swiss rolled together. I may never hear from this person. I may get someone that says, like, stop blowing up my phone, right? I may be someone who's mad at me. I may get ghosted. I could get blocked. Who knows? But I am 100% responsible for whatever is going to happen. I feel really good about it. Again, judgments and assumptions, right? I read it over again. I determine I am truly 100% responsible for whatever it is that happens. I hit send. Send the text message off. Now, some of you have the Hallmark channel, and you are writing a story in your head right now that me and this person have run off into some forest somewhere in Vermont and are making flamingo syrup or something. No, that did not happen. However, I did get a response. And remember, whatever it is that happens, I'm 100% responsible for. I have taken responsibility for the impact, whether I get a response or not. In this case, I did get a response, and I'm not defensive. I'm not court reporting the situation. The response that came back was, I knew it! Exclamation point, exclamation point. They shared that my Aunt Sylvia, I did not tell this person my aunt's name, but Sylvia made such a difference in so many people's lives that she's still in people's phones. So this person gets wrong number calls or text messages all the time and uses these moments as a reminder for them to contact all the women in their lives that have made a difference, because they can still reach out to that person. Well, that's amazing. This has happened a long time ago now, and it still works. Every time I tell this story, I remember what it feels like to be in my aunt's presence and to feel seen and accepted and loved. That is a source of hope that hasn't died with my aunt's passing. And it has continued on as people accidentally misdial or mistext this person who's lucky enough to have my aunt's recycled cell phone number. Now, we don't engage in a conversation. I don't know the person's name. We have maybe I'll wrong text them again. They're still on my phone. I didn't delete Sylvia's number. But to take responsibility for what could have happened, what that impact could have been, and for it to turn out so wonderful and so powerful is a source of hope I don't want to forget. And then if I want to make meaning from this conversation, especially in the world that we are living in now, isn't it wonderful to think that like that act of kindness or empowerment or love or joy can spread even long after my aunt's passing? I can make meaning of this little text exchange and that I did good and they did good. And for a brief second, it was really, really good between 2 strangers using technology. The impact on my connection with this person gets even bigger as my hope expands. My impact on everyone I'm around makes me happier. I'm a professional speaker. I couldn't ask for a better closing story if you'd wanted me to. And I get to tell this story to you over and over again. Some of y'all are repeats and you want the flamingo story. It's like Margaritaville if I was Jimmy Buffett or something. Tell the flamingo story again. By making meaning of the conversation that happened and sharing it with other people, the impact can still happen. And the impact on the connection I have with you, you weren't even there when it originally happened. I'm spreading hope because the goal was to make a better connection with humans. And it doesn't have to be the person on the other side of a wrong number. Today, my goal with you has been to make a better connection. I said at the very beginning, if you're watching this, that means that I have been called in for jury duty. Jury duty is one of those things that we understand our civic duty, but when it really comes, you're kind of like, ugh, I have stuff to do, right? And you fill out the form on the church pew, and I'm filling out the form and I'm like, no, it's not a financial hazard. And no, I don't need to be paid $15 a day out of the county that I know doesn't have very much money. And that means I'm probably going to move on to the next level, right? It is my civic duty in my local community. And I'm sure while you're watching this and I'm sitting there, I'm going to have to work at reminding myself that I want to support the local community I live in. And if I can keep in mind that making a better connection to my local community and making sure that a fair, impartial group of peers is here to listen to whatever the case content might be, I don't even know what that is, and that this jury duty service, I'm available evidently through February 9th until I'm dismissed or the case is resolved. So I can have intentional service in that moment because I know when the end date might be. Sure, it's not very specific. It's pretty nebulous. And I really freaked out the conference organizers by not getting dismissed on Friday. So everyone, buy Amy specifically, a cocktail for me. We can listen to others as if they're wise, which could be all of you attendees. It's the people and the volunteers who put this event together. I gave as much notice as I possibly could because I am at events. I know it can be really stressful. And in practicing what it would mean to be empathetic and think about where the other person is coming from, I can be responsible for multiple different iterations of what I could assume or judge could be happening over there. And then I can take that information and use it to inform how I'm going to say what I want to say, what I'm going to say, when I'm going to say it, why am I even talking? I can form that message and be 100% responsible for my intended meaning of that message before it has escaped my fingertips, my thumbs, or my mouth. I can know why I am doing what I'm doing. Again, if you're watching this recording, I can know that I am representing my community as a peer. I can be an impartial jury person and listen to information and give someone hope that justice will actually be served by a group of their peers. If I can be 100% responsible for the message I have formed, then I can send it out and I can say what it is that I believe or think based on the information that I have. If this goes to trial and I end up having a conversation with my other jury folks about all the information that was presented, we can have a raucous conversation. We can listen to each other. We can ask questions. We can challenge each other. I think about like board work that I do when I'm consulting with organizations. You can have a raucous conversation, and you should. I feel like it's your responsibility as a leader in the community or in an organization or on a board or on a jury or just living. I think the biggest lesson I ever learned from the archival research I did on Mother Teresa is that most of us don't even know what we believe. The lesson I learned from Mother Teresa is to question your beliefs. And if it survives your own raucous questioning process, you'll just believe in it that much stronger. But you'll know why. And you can explain it to other people and share the hope that your beliefs bring you with other people. And if it doesn't survive your own questioning process, then you can learn and adapt, change your mind, expand your view. And then that needs to be questioned. When we can be 100% responsible for what we do, even if it's just some of the time, that's better than how most of us communicate with each other on a general given basis. Once we do that, we can release the Kraken and we can claim, or for some of us, reclaim responsibility for the impact of the message that we sent out without being defensive, without being a gobbling turkey, without being a court reporter. We can be responsible for whatever happens and we can try again. It's a cycle, it's a loop. Because when we make meaning of this conversation and this impact on a connection, we can do better. We can encourage ourselves to keep it up. A lot of times when I talk about good enough now, people get really like, well, I don't even know what that means. I don't know what good enough now means. Well, my mantra is to do the best you can with what you've got some of the time, because it's better than nothing never. Now, I'm going to repeat it because it's a pretty low bar, but most of us are like, nah, I don't think I could do that. Do the best you can with what you've got some of the time, because it's better than nothing never. That is good enough now. Now, hopefully you have the handout, but just in case, I'm going to share it one more time so that you can take a screenshot of it, etc. I recommend keep this on your phone, put it near your computer. I want you to think about this when you have a challenging conversation. Can you slow down enough to notice where the challenge is coming from? Can you practice enough with people that you may not ever even see again to practice getting through the pieces where you typically take an off-ramp? Now, better connections, intentional conversations, listen to others as if they're wise, form a message, be super clear on your intended meaning of that message. 100% responsible, extra bonus. Release the Kraken. Then you're going to claim or reclaim responsibility for the impact of that message. You're going to make meaning of this conversation, the impact on the person or the community that you're trying to engage with, and you're going to start over. Because hope lives in better connections. And that is a conversation that matters. Those better connections are how you're going to be able to keep doing the work and foster a sense of hope in others, and most importantly, in yourself. Now, again, the texting number is 202-670-4262. 202-670-4262. Feel free to text message me anytime, anything, anywhere. Save me in your phone, Jess Pettit. If you're interested in staying in touch, you can always go to flamingo.day. But I'm going to leave you with inside COVID again. I had just gotten a COVID booster and I talked my way into a shingles booster. And those cold chills were starting to come. So I decided to go to my local library and get a new book because I knew I was going to be down for the count for a couple days and I just wanted a new book. As I was driving back home from my public library, somebody ran a stop sign going about 80 miles an hour and hit my car. Now I had a Fiat and they just hit the bumper. But had it been 1 second later, they would have hit the side of my car. And in a Fiat, I don't know if I'd be here today. Their car proceeded down the hill, eventually came to a stop. Mine got swooshed around pretty hard, airbags deployed. I've never been in a car wreck with airbags. Highly recommend. It was weird. Eventually, I kind of realized what's happened. The impact was so hard that my keys separated from the key in the ignition. I still don't even understand how that's possible, but they were in the floorboard along with my cell phone and my water bottle. And as I'm picking up my stuff and I realize what's happening, I look out what's left of my windshield. And there's 3 kids that got out of that car. They're not wearing shoes. There's glass everywhere. I didn't see the little telltale bumps of car seats. They got out of the car so fast, I made an assumption that they weren't wearing seatbelts. The driver eventually gets out. She looks pretty dazed, probably frustrated would be my guess. And in that moment, I got to decide, who do I want to be right now? Obviously, I'm not at fault because I didn't run a stop sign. I also wasn't going 80 miles an hour in a residential road. Possibly because of the vaccinations and the shingles shot. maybe I was just operating a little slower. But it dawned on me that neither of us had this moment planned. I'm okay. I have full insurance. I have medical insurance. The car, I didn't know at the time, was totaled because of the airbags, but it was still, I was fine, completely unscathed. It looked like they were fine. They had a much bigger car than me. But I was in a car wreck when I was in third grade, and it really changed my life. I still have nightmares about it. I had to go to therapy after the wreck. That was the beginning of me going to therapy. And I just kept thinking of those kids. I didn't know what their insurance situation was. I didn't know what they were in a hurry for. I didn't know. When I got out of the car, I decided to talk to my community member with the intention of making a better connection. Nobody wanted this to happen. So let's get through it, and let's get through it together. I could be anybody getting out of that car. I'm the professional speaker. And it took me a couple beats to realize that I have a choice of how I'm going to show up. These skills that you're learning today are not specific to work. They're specific to how you show up in your community, how you instill hope in other people, and what you do to keep a spark of hope in yourself. I'm going to encourage you to do the best you can with what you've got some of the time. You do not need to do a better connection conversation that matter flowchart every single email, every single text, every single time you speak to a human being. That's exhausting. But what if you did it enough that it became a habit? Or that in the right moment, something clicks and you realize, wait a minute, take a breath. You're about to engage with someone and you get to choose how and who you're going to be in this conversation. In that moment, when I was stepping out of my car, I could easily have wanted to be right or to win. Obviously, I wasn't at fault for the accident, but I didn't think that that's what mattered the most. People deserve kindness and respect, even when they're wrong. And that is a really hard thing to remember right now. And the best way to remember it is to give hope to somebody else. Do the best you can with what you've got some of the time, because that is good enough. To have a conversation that matters means that you're going to prioritize a better connection. And that better connection is what's going to keep your sense of hope, and hopefully that hope will spread. Princeton Community Works, thank you again for being flexible for me during jury service. Know that the people that you serve and work with are grateful for every ounce of work that you do. You give people hope. And please use this community moment to share and reconnect with one another. Fill back up what you need to fill up so that we can all get back to work. If we can all get back to work, we can do the best we can with what we got some of the time. I'm Jess Pettit, and that is good enough now. Thank you.